Imagine waking up tomorrow without that shaky, disconnected feeling, despite taking your dose exactly as prescribed, eating breakfast, and actually feeling energized instead of anxious about the crash you know is coming. Making it through your entire workday with your brain firing on all cylinders. No more 2 p.m. fog where you can't remember what you were saying mid-sentence. Having your blood sugar respond predictably to the same meals instead of those wild swings. Feeling your actual energy return. Not jittery fake energy, the deep, steady vitality you remember from before you started your GLP journey. Going out to dinner with friends without the constant mental calculation of, will this wreck me for the next 6 hours? Getting your life back while keeping the weight off and staying on your medication. Because you're not choosing between being thin and being functional anymore. Your body could do both, but only if you address the GLP-induced 3-signal nutrient blackout correctly. So now you understand all 3 signals that collapse when you run low on key nutrients. But you're probably wondering, how do I know if this is happening to me? Fair question. Because maybe you're thinking, sure, this sounds logical, but is this really what's causing my crashes, my fatigue, my blood sugar chaos? As I mentioned before, in 2024, scientists analyzed health records from nearly 500,000 adults using GLP medications, the largest study ever conducted on this. What they found was stunning. 22.4% developed measurable nutrient deficiencies within their first 12 months. That's not a small subset. That's nearly 1 in every 5 people taking the same medication you are. This confirms it's not random or genetic coincidence. This is purely mathematical. When your medication reduces your appetite, that's roughly a 16 to 39% calorie reduction. But your body's need for nutrients doesn't drop by 40 to 50%. And once I understood that, I knew exactly what I needed to find. Something that could rejuvenate all 3 signals simultaneously. That's when I stumbled onto something that's been doing exactly this for over 1,400 years. In ancient China, physicians treating patients with damp heat syndrome faced a mystery. These patients had symptoms we'd recognize instantly today: uncontrollable thirst, constant hunger, crushing fatigue, unpredictable energy crashes, blood sugar chaos. Centuries before we had glucose meters or understood metabolism, conventional remedies weren't working. Then, these physicians discovered one plant that succeeded where everything else failed. They called it Huanglian, the golden thread. When you slice open the root, brilliant yellow runs through it like veins of gold, threading through the plant's core. That golden color is the active compound we now call berberine, the same molecule now backed by thousands of modern studies. And here's what makes this relevant to understanding GLP-induced blood sugar crashes. Those ancient physicians didn't understand calorie depletion or know about GLP-1 medications, but they observed patients whose bodies had lost the ability to manage glucose properly, and berberine restored all 3 metabolic signals without those ancient physicians even realizing. Let's start with signal number 1. Remember those ignition switches inside your cells, the ones that crack glucose open and release energy? Berberine is what flips those switches on. Even when your nutrient levels are low, berberine maximizes whatever enzymatic function you still have available. Signal number 2. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Your GLP-1 medication floods your system with external GLP hormones to suppress appetite. But berberine does something completely different. It protects L cells in your gut, the ones that make your body's natural GLP hormones. Studies in living animals and in isolated cells show that berberine can increase active GLP-1 levels, not by mimicking the hormone or replacing it, but by shielding your cells from the oxidative stress. So you're not purely dependent on external dosing. Your body maintains some of its natural backup system. And signal number 3 is all about forcing your cellular doors to open. Remember those transport doors built into your cells, the ones that let glucose inside. Berberine flips your cell's master energy switch, helping more of those glucose doors move to the surface and open. Suddenly, sugar that was bouncing around your bloodstream with nowhere to go floods into your cells, where it converts into actual energy. That's your cells actually getting fed again. When researchers compared berberine to metformin in a 3-month study, something surprising happened. Berberine worked just as well as metformin at lowering blood sugar. People taking berberine saw their long-term blood sugar levels drop by 7.5%. Their morning blood sugar dropped by almost 7%. And their blood sugar after meals down by 11%. berberine actually helped cells grow more doors for glucose to enter. So there are more places for sugar to go, and your cells can actually use it for energy instead of letting it pile up in your blood. That's huge for GLP-1 users. So you might be thinking, everything sounds good, just berberine is enough, right? Not quite. There's an important limitation to understand here for a GLP-1 user. If you took berberine alone while still nutrient depleted, the results would be modest at best. That's the problem with high-dose berberine supplements marketed for blood sugar control. They assume your calories are at normal levels and your baseline nutrition supports enzymatic function. But as a GLP-1 user, your baseline nutrition probably doesn't support anything. Berberine alone can't overcome that fundamental depletion, which brings us to something critical about how berberine actually works in the human body. In classical Chinese medicine texts, physicians typically combined berberine with other herbs. They understood through centuries of observation that berberine worked best alongside specific botanicals, and modern research has revealed exactly why. Berberine could activate metabolic pathways and rejuvenate all three signals, so you keep losing weight and feel good, but only if the raw nutrients those signals need are actually present. Without them, it's like pressing a gas pedal in a car with no fuel. The engine revs, nothing moves. But when berberine works alongside the right minerals and vitamins, it could help you avoid the three-signal blackout entirely. That's why understanding what works alongside berberine matters so much for anyone experiencing blood sugar chaos. Which brings me to magnesium. Its deficiency is 10 times more common in people struggling with blood sugar control than in those with healthy glucose levels. 10 times. Think about it. At 1,000 calories a day, you're running on empty. As I mentioned before, your body needs about 400 milligrams of magnesium daily just to keep basic metabolic functions running. You're lucky if you're getting 200 milligrams while on a GLP-1 weight loss journey. Berberine activates enzymes. It's the signal that says, get to work. But magnesium is what makes them capable of working in the first place. That crushing fatigue you feel, that's your cells literally unable to convert glucose into usable energy. And this is exactly why berberine alone can't address GLP-induced crashes. Without magnesium, berberine is waving its baton at an empty orchestra pit. When researchers tested magnesium supplementation in people with blood sugar problems, the results confirm this. Insulin sensitivity improved measurably, and participants' cells responded to it much better. That's a meaningful improvement from a single mineral. But there's a second deficiency quietly undermining your system from a completely different angle, at the level of insulin itself. In 1934, researcher David Scott discovered something that changed everything we know about insulin. He found that insulin doesn't just float around loosely inside your pancreas, waiting to be used. It gets packed into tight, organized bundles, and each bundle is held together by 2 atoms of zinc. No zinc? The bundles fall apart. Insulin can't be stored properly or released on time. Fast forward to today, scientists studying people with blood sugar issues found that over half of them were zinc deficient. And for GLP-1 users eating dramatically fewer calories, risks climb even higher, because you're simply not eating enough of the zinc-rich foods your body depends on. Across multiple studies, adding zinc back did the same thing. Long-term blood sugar averages improved, and cells started responding to insulin more reliably. For a GLP-1 user, that's huge. Magnesium and zinc can give your system the hardware it needs. Your enzymes can run, your insulin can be stored and heard, and berberine finally has something solid to work with. But there's still one more problem GLP-1 users run into every day. And that's where a very unusual plant comes in. In mountain villages across Asia, South America, India, and East Africa, there's a vegetable so bitter that children spit it out on first taste. For centuries, local healers used it to treat what they called sweet urine disease, their way of describing what we now know as blood sugar issues. They noticed people who ate this bitter fruit regularly had steady energy, fewer episodes of weakness, and better overall health. For a long time, Western science brushed this off as folklore. Then researchers started looking at what bitter melon actually does inside your cells, and it turned out to be unlike almost anything else. Remember those little doors that have to move to the cell surface before glucose can get into your cells? Bitter melon contains special compounds that push more of those doors into position. In simple terms, it nudges your cells to behave like you just went for a walk, even if you're sitting on the couch after another GLP-induced crash. In one human study, around 2,000 milligrams of bitter melon extract per day led to real improvements. Blood sugar came down, and fructosamine dropped in a meaningful way. It's not an overnight miracle, but steady, reliable support in how your body actually handles glucose. Now, I wanted to ask you about something important, and you've probably lived it. Here's the question. Why does the exact same meal give you completely different results 2 days in a row? Monday's breakfast, perfectly fine. You feel great all morning. Meanwhile, Wednesday's identical breakfast got you shaking and sweating by 10 a.m., wondering if you need to pull over if you're driving. Same GLP-1 medication dose. Same food, same portion size. So what changed? What changed is how quickly that meal moved from your stomach into your intestines, where sugar actually gets absorbed. When food dumps too fast, glucose slams into your bloodstream all at once, and you spike. And with your gut signals already scrambled by low nutrients and GLP medication, that timing can swing wildly from one day to the next. That's where Ceylon cinnamon comes in, and not the cheap cassia cinnamon that can strain your liver. True Ceylon cinnamon comes from the hills of Sri Lanka, where a special type of cinnamon has been used for thousands of years to calm digestion. Modern studies show that cinnamon cut the total glucose response by about 13%, and insulin sensitivity improved, with benefits lasting for hours after a single dose. Ceylon cinnamon acts like a gentle brake on the on-ramp, controlling how quickly sugar enters your bloodstream, so your cells aren't overwhelmed all at once. For someone on GLP-1 medication, with gut functioning already out of rhythm, that kind of smoothing could be a big deal. But I also wanted to talk about chromium and why it's so important for GLP-1 users concerned about blood sugar issues. First, let's go back in time a bit. In 1957, a biochemist discovered something that would earn him a footnote in every textbook about glucose metabolism. He did a rat study on a chromium-deficient diet. Within weeks, they developed severe glucose intolerance. Their blood sugar spiraled out of control despite normal insulin production. But when he added chromium back, their insulin sensitivity was restored almost immediately. We now understand that chromium enhances insulin receptor signaling. It makes the molecular lock on your cell's surfaces easier for insulin to turn. Modern researchers analyzed 28 different clinical trials, testing chromium supplementation. The pattern was undeniable. Fasting glucose dropped, and effects were most pronounced in people with the worst baseline control. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, so if I restore all these nutrients and mechanisms, I'm done, right? Not yet. What kept showing up in the research data made absolutely no sense at first. Researchers would see GLP-1, users who'd restored their magnesium, their zinc, their chromium, people who were taking berberine and bitter melon and everything else. Their numbers looked good on paper. Their enzyme function should have been working, yet their insulin was still barely registering in their cells. It was like they'd addressed every part of a communication system, except one critical component. When researchers tracked GLP-1 users over 12 months, 13.6% developed clinical vitamin D deficiency within their first year, deficient enough to show up on standard blood work as a red flag and lead to symptoms like fatigue, bone, or muscle aches. That's the single highest deficiency rate of any nutrient they measured. And here's why that's potentially catastrophic for blood sugar stability. Vitamin D is absolutely critical for insulin receptor function. Without adequate vitamin D, those receptors become deaf to insulin signal. It's like trying to hear someone knocking on your door while wearing noise-canceling headphones at full volume. The insulin is there. It's doing its job. Your cells just can't detect it properly. When scientists analyzed 39 randomized controlled trials testing vitamin D supplementation, the results were striking. They found that when people with blood sugar issues took vitamin D, their blood sugar numbers went down, their 3-month averages improved, and their bodies started responding to insulin more effectively. But here's the critical finding. These benefits showed up almost exclusively in people who were deficient to begin with. We can safely say that benefits are stronger and more consistent in people who are deficient. So if you're depleted, which most GLP-1 users are, restoration creates dramatic improvement. Now you understand why isolated interventions often fail for GLP-induced blood sugar chaos. It's not any single ingredient that's missing. It's a combination of specific different compounds, working across 3 collapse signals simultaneously. Those Chinese physicians 1400 years ago understood something modern medicine keeps forgetting. When multiple systems fail simultaneously, you can't restore them one at a time. You need the entire ensemble playing together. And that's why your blood sugar probably stays chaotic, despite perfect compliance with your GLP medication. Now, let me be honest with you. You could try to piece this together yourself. Buy Berberine from one company, Magnesium from another, bitter melon from a third. Spend hours figuring out which cinnamon won't wreck your liver, which zinc actually works, whether you need this form or that form. I've had patients show up with shopping bags full of bottles, 12 different supplements, 30 pills a day, $300 a month. Honestly, it's a horrible experience. So here's what I did. I took everything you just learned about this GLP-1/3 signal nutrient blackout and partnered with the incredible team at Pure Health Research to create the blood sugar formula. Not another generic blood sugar support supplement throwing random ingredients at people with regular blood sugar problems, but a precision-engineered formula specifically designed for people on GLP-1 medications, for folks eating barely 1,000 calories a day whose bodies are being starved of the nutrients they need to function. When your signals collapse all at once, you need all of them addressed at once, in the right amounts, in the right forms, working together. That's what blood sugar formula does. This is the formula engineered specifically for people whose medication is working for weight loss, while quietly draining the metabolic fuel their bodies need to run. Let me tell you what I'm seeing from people who already tried blood sugar formula, from people like Andrew. It was his 65th birthday. He spent it in the hospital. The blood test came back. The doctor looked at him and said, "You're probably going to need insulin for the rest of your life." Andrew started researching, found blood sugar formula, changed what he was eating, started taking it. His latest blood test, completely normal. His exact words, "This product has helped maintain my blood sugar normal. There isn't a day that I'm not grateful." 65 years old, told he'd need insulin forever. Now he doesn't need it at all. How incredible is that? Then there's the woman whose husband went through hell with cancer diagnosis, 18 rounds of treatment, had to stop because it destroyed his stomach. They put him on steroids for 4 months. His blood sugar went through the roof. Doctors said he had blood sugar issues and wanted to put him on more medications. She said no and put him on blood sugar formula instead. 5 weeks later, they went back for testing. 191 down to 97. Her words, "Thanks for making a product that does what it says it will do." You know what these people have in common? They stopped living scared. Now, imagine waking up and not immediately calculating what you can eat and when. Not declining invitations because you can't trust your body in public, or watching everyone else enjoy dessert while you sit there with nothing. You're not terrified of your next doctor's appointment. You actually look forward to it. You go to bed without worry, and you wake up with energy, simply because you gave your body what it needed to do its job.